The hyenas of sleep gather, snapping their necessary teeth. My desolate bed reminds them of the Serengeti. A smell in the air tells them something is wounded. Their jaws open with the low whoops of natural excitement. They all freeze at the sight of my pale body falling through the startling night, falling to the dry white grass, opening arms and legs to their unembarrassed stares. The sounds settle. They all begin to move. That's Night Watch from Kathleen Lynch's book, Why I Love Oysters. And I'm Bob Stanley, and I'm here with Kathleen Lynch at Twin Lotus Thai Restaurant on a kind of a drizzly Tuesday.
Kind of Irish weather day.
Irish weather day.
Yeah.
And you're an Irish woman?
100%.
Yeah.
Like proven 100%. Yeah. I think I have like 1% something else from way back other lands.
We've all got a little bit of Neanderthal.
Yeah. Well, I am partly Neanderthal.
Oh, good.
Proud of it, too.
Okay. That's right. So Kathleen Lynch is a many-time published poet, a Pushcart Prize winner. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and I just want to kind of ask you about what got you into poetry. What pulled you in, and then what gave you this sense of vision that I think you have in your poetry?
Which part of the question would you like to start with?
Well, where did you start? What started you in poetry?
Hearing things that caught my ear. And I was born in a large family, and we had a mother and father who were both pretty high verbal, and they read to us. Not a lot, but the thing that really caught me as a poem was hearing things read by my mother from the Great American Poetry collection in 1939. And I did not have any idea. I think I was 4 when I first started really listening to them. I had no idea what that was about, but I liked certain sounds and then I realized that some of the things called poems had a message, but some of them did not, and they were still interesting. So that's what caught me as a kid, and I did not like poetry in high school because it was taught by the nuns who were very careful about what we were allowed to read.
So when you say the sounds of poetry, any particular poems you remember from your childhood?
There actually is. In fact, I just Googled it before I got here so that I could share it. And this is an actual poem from that old publication that my mother read, and we all heard it, and we all knew it by heart. I pretty much know it by heart, but right now I can't trust memory, so I'm going to have it to be able to read it. And it was called Somebody's Mother. The woman was old and ragged and gray and bent with the chill of the winter's day. The street was wet with the recent snow, and the woman's feet were aged and slow. She stood at the crossing and waited long, alone, uncared for, amid the throng of human beings who passed her by, none heeding the glance of her anxious eyes. Down the street, with laughter and shout, glad in the freedom of school let out, came the boys like a flock of sheep, hailing the snow piled white and deep. Past the woman so old and gray, hastened the children on their way, nor offered a helping hand to her, so meek, so timid, afraid to stir, lest the carriage wheels or the horse's feet should crowd her down on the slippery street. At last came one of the merry troop, the gayest laddie of all the group. He paused beside her and whispered low, "I'll help you across if you wish to go." Her aged hand on his strong young arm she placed, and so, without hurt or harm, he guided her trembling feet along, proud that his own were firm and strong. Then back again to his friends he went, his young heart happy and well content. She's somebody's mother, boys, you know, for all she's aged and poor and slow, and I hope some fellow will lend a hand to help my mother, you understand, if she's ever old, poor and old and gray, and her own dear boy is far away. And somebody's mother bowed low her head in her home that night, and the prayer she said was, God, be kind to the noble boy who is someone's son and pride and joy. Now, I know that's corny, but it grabbed me because when he talked about when the poem says that the boy was wishing that his friends their mothers might have their sons far away, I thought that's like Dad going to war, because my dad he was in World War II. He had to go to the Korean War. He went to wars. My brother went to wars. It's like this, the little boy knows that this is the role that boys are going to go to, and that it still is. It still is. And so there was something about this poem, the rhythms, that it told a story, and that it had an emotion. Now, I know we were all supposed to like way love our mother that way, and we did, but that to me, that wasn't the purpose of the poem. Wasn't to feel sorry for the old mother. It was to feel, I think I felt sorry for the boy, that he knew so much about war as a kid.
So it's more than what you get on the surface.
There's more than I did, yeah.
And so that was one of the poems from your youth, and then high school it was more strict or more selective, and you really didn't connect with poetry. What brought you back?
I never was gone. I mean, once I started hearing poems, I was really eager to learn how to read them, and I was getting myself taught before I went to first grade so that I could read the Dick and Jane readers by the time I got there. But I wanted to know how to read those letters in the poem book. We didn't have a lot of books then. We had that book. I wanted to figure out how to think like that and how to talk like that. You're just little, you don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to think, but that's what I was. I was trying to figure out how to make a story, make it sound good to remember. That's what I thought the rhyming was and the rhythm was, that it was to make it good to remember. And really, when you think of it, all the great speeches in Homer and all of that, the repetition and similarity in sound is what it's all about. Because the people who used to come and sit in the big places and listen to the rhapsodes would get out there and they would tell the poems, and everybody who came, nobody wrote, nobody had anything to write on or knew how to write or anything like that. So the memory was the important thing. And for me, that's what started me loving.
So the memory, so kind of realizing that was what kept it in the mind, was the repetition or the pattern or the alliteration or the rhyme, whatever it is.
And more, because one of the other things is that there were other poems in the book. It's the great love poems of the American people. There were other poems that she would never read, and I'd point to them. And she would say, that's not really a poem. And
This is your mother?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Who was super smart and fabulous and wonderful, and not wonderful. But the thing about that was I always have felt sorry for the thing that's being left out. So I thought, why is that not a poem? So as soon as I learned how to read, I would go back and read those in the Great American Poem Book. And I thought, why is that different from the other ones that we liked? Like we like stories like little orphan Annie's come to our house to say, wash the cups and saucers up and put the crumbs away, shoo the chickens off the porch. And when them things is done, we sits about the fire. We have the mostest fun listening to the witch tales that Annie tells about, and the goblins will get you if you don't watch out. And that was a wonderful thing, and that was such an involvement. But then I thought somebody else wrote a poem that was in this book that's called The Great American Poetry, and it doesn't do that. So why doesn't it do that? And as I kept learning to read, this is all my own, on my own, in the bed at night with the book, trying to figure things out, I started realizing that there were other ways to make poems. And when I read my first E.E. Cummings, I was bonked out. I thought, oh my God, I didn't think, oh my God, because I was a very proper girl. No swear words entered my vocabulary until I was 20, and then they all came out in a big flood, which continues. But yeah, so I kind of oddly taught myself by wanting to learn these things. I didn't know who to ask. Nobody in the family was terribly interested in poetry. My sister Pat was extremely wonderful and interested in Shakespeare, which is so poetry. But I felt like that was there for everyone to get, and I wanted to know why these odd things weren't there for other people to get. So I just kept teaching looking things up. That we didn't have any internet or anything like that, but I'd get out dictionaries, and I fell in love with dictionaries. I became a wordaholic at an early age, and I would smuggle our dictionary to the to bed. If I was going to have moonlight onto my bunk bed, I'd have that book there at night because I had new words to learn. And I would just look words up that I didn't know and see what. And then I liked the fact that in the dictionary, with their slim little pages, they had tiny drawings and sometimes maps, and then they had this description of where they came from, what different languages they came from. That's when I began to understand language is forever, and it goes all over, and it's constantly meeting and re-meeting itself as the world changes, as everybody changes. So.
And when did you start writing?
I started writing as soon as I could print, but I didn't think I was writing anything. I just was like putting words that I liked. And I think when I got into high school, I started thinking maybe I could make something like one of those weird poems that I thought like E.E. Cummings. But I certainly didn't think like that. I did not think I was going to grow up to be a poet or a writer. I actually grew up with no idea of what I would be when I grew up. You know how people ask kids when they're little, what are you going to be what do you want to be? Somebody asked my daughter when she was 4, what are you going to be when you grow up? And she looked surprised and she said, I already am something. So I didn't have that psyche going for me at that stage. So I just decided to, yeah. So nuns at Loretto. I was at an all-girls Catholic school, all Catholic education, all Irish Catholic, and because we were Irish Catholic, you had to go to the Catholic schools. But when we moved out to the North area, we couldn't. St. Ignatius was being built, and I was going into 6th grade, and I couldn't. They hadn't built to the 6th grade yet. They built it up to the 3rd, so the next year was going to add 6th to the 6th, and so I was sent to the public school. So 1 year of my life, I went to cottage school because my mother didn't want me to forget that I was Catholic. I went in my Catholic school uniform, to the public school with my hair in long red braids and my geeky everything. And I was so mocked and so taunted by the,
Oh no.
well, these are schoolboys,
These are
school
kids,
kids, yeah. And all I could do was wait to get through the torment of them tossing things to me, saying things to me, until I got up to the tetherball pole, which I'd never met before, and I started doing tetherball with myself, and I loved that. But finally, the teacher wrote to my mother, or called my mother on the telephone, the old-fashioned telephone, the dial phone, and told her, maybe don't have me come in the uniform anymore, because it was hard for me. And
Yeah.
it was. And I didn't know that that's why. I didn't even know why people were doing anything to me, because
Yeah, you wouldn't understand.
I just thought, what's wrong with me? But and the principal confirmed to my mother that I should not be coming in the Catholic school uniform. And as soon as that stopped and I got a few little outfits, I could just be like a regular kid. And then eventually I was able to get my braids cut so I could feel like a normal girl. And all I wanted to do ever in school was pass. I didn't ever want to flunk. I thought flunking was the worst thing. So I worked hard in every class. So I was always a straight A student. It was hard to do that with math and things like that, but I did it. But then because I had to go, when St. Ignatius built the sixth grade, I had to repeat sixth grade, even though I got a straight A's in public school. I had to do it again. So I came there as they thought I flunked and that I was doing sixth grade again.
Because the Catholic school was a year ahead.
Yeah, well, because I couldn't go when I was at that age. And then when the school got to the sixth grade classroom, I was ready for seventh grade, but that would have been another public school where it's seventh grade, too many hormones and stuff. So
Yeah.
you got to put your little girls in better places. So
Yeah. Did you ever write poems that look back at that period, or?
no, I'm careful about discussing that period.
Yeah.
She said doing this publicly.
You do have that one poem about I got mine from Mercy. I always get a sense of Sacramento in that poem.
Very Sacramento, yeah.
Very Sacramento. You're like the Joan Didion of poetry.
The Joan Didion of poetry.
Yeah, kind of.
And see, my hearing is going so bad, I thought you said you're like the Joan Didion of poetry.
I did pronounce it funny. Well, I had so many questions about your poems because they're very intense, and we were talking earlier about prose poems, which I think are not so much like E. E. Cummings, but maybe in a way they kind of fit that category of poems that aren't like the other poems.
Right.
Kind of what makes a prose poem, and it's always been something interesting to me. And I've got a copy of one of your chapbooks called No Spring Chicken, and I came across this poem, and I don't know, maybe a little bit like the hyena poem. It seemed like a dream poem to me, but I thought maybe I'll read this, and then you can talk about either that poem or prose poems or dream poems, if any of those ring a bell. This is called A Departure. Gravid with dreams, she leaves her house one night, arms straight out like a plank. She sees a watering place. The local river, she finds, has shrunken to a soapy trickle. Frogs have gone elsewhere, and even in her sleep, she knows this is bad water. She squats in a nearby field. With some opening and closing of her body, she produces a pile of white knuckles that look like eggs. They are far too unusual to leave in the field, so she gathers them into the crook of her arm. They are far too unusual to take home, so she stays in the field, waits for something to change. The moon moves slowly above, pulling all the water. So you wrote that a long time ago.
Yes, I did. I guess when you say a long time ago, at 80, everything was a long time ago. But yeah, I didn't start writing like that until I was probably in my late 30s or early 40s. We moved a lot, not our family, but once I was in the world alone with my kids, and we moved like 30 times, 35 times when I had the little kids with me before I met Eddie. And it was a tumultuous kind of life. But I still I'm not someone who keeps a daily journal or anything like that. I tried, God knows I tried to keep a journal, and I have a lot of partial journals that I still could look at, but I didn't do that all the time, and I never thought I was learning. I just always thought I was changing. Does that make sense? When I started going to Sac State, I started at City College. I was on welfare. I had 2 children I was raising, and back in the day, I couldn't get support for getting child support. So my ex-husband, who I left, who I did not want to marry, though he was a nice person, but I had to because I was knocked up. He had a lawyer friend he was a millionaire by then. He was the husband, and the millionaire the lawyer made it so that he had to only pay $60 a month. The ex-husband paid $60 a month child support. And so my welfare was $270 a month for my children, plus food stamps. Oh. And it was just a hard time. So I started, I had no transportation. I borrowed a bicycle, and I would ride with the kids on the front, one on the front and one on the back, holding my waist. And I had a little stand on the front thing too. And I'd go to City College, where they had a really wonderful daycare program for parents of children, people who couldn't afford daycare. And it was a wonderful program, and I could drop the kids there and take classes. And I took a bunch of classes, and I didn't know I was going to take poetry, but I did take a poetry class there. I wish I could remember the gentleman's name, but he had his poetry class go up and teach at the Vacaville. It's not Vacaville.
The women's prison there, the women's facility.
No, it was a mental.
Criminally insane. It was actually where Sirhan went.
Yeah, it was a place where they kept the criminally insane.
Okay.
So
the class would go there and teach.
No, so
or he would go and
the
teach. Handful
of kids that he thought could talk about writing.
Okay.
Certainly better than I'm doing right now. But he had us go there for a few times, and for years after that, one of the criminally insane prisoners.
Is that where you met Eddie?
I wish. Well, he would have been very young then, because he's almost 7 years younger than I am now. So,
sorry,
yeah.
Go back to your story.
But one of them, I don't know how they do this, but no matter where I moved the next several years, and it was always like strange things, like I lived in someone's garage with the kids, and then I lived in someone's house, and then I moved around a lot, and I would get letters handwritten mail to that address from him.
So he'd find you.
Yeah, he could find me. He had people out here who could find anyone, anywhere. So it was very strange, and I thought, I'm probably not going to go teach at the prisons anymore, because even though a lot of them are good people who did mistakes, some of them are not that good. So I withdrew myself from that kind of public exposure. But
so City College, you took a poetry class, and then did it But all along you had been interested in poetry? It was kind of an undercurrent, or?
And I had no idea I was going to, quote unquote, become a poet. I did finally get over to Sac State. It took me years. I went piecemeal through every season, every episode of that time. And I was not a poetry major. I majored in English because I thought, well, that's the language I speak. So
Yeah, that's what I did that too.
So I did English and sociology.
Okay.
So, and that's where I met Dennis Schmitz, who is a fabulous teacher. But I only took 3 classes from him, and only one of them was about writing poetry. Another one was about plays written in other countries. So it was wonderful to meet him and everything. But there was a fabulous poetry community at Sac State, but I was on the outskirts. I was in the business of becoming a feminist, and that didn't necessarily merge with other groups right at the get-go. I kept reading, and and because Dennis would say things like poets mention like Sylvia Plath, and I didn't know who that was, and I'd go to the library and I'd check out a Sylvia Plath, and I'd think, oh my God, this is what poetry is, and then it was Anne Sexton. And I actually have a poem where the man slices a line of the poem out of a book, and that was from an Anne Sexton book. And so it's very hodgepodge, my journey into poetry and to poetry writing, and even teaching. I taught through poets in the schools because I loved it so much, and I knew if I could learn how to like a poem like something I hadn't seen before, that I could help someone else do that. So I was a good teacher.
California Poets in the Schools.
California Poets in Schools for many years.
Yeah.
And
so any poems that you brought today that you might like to share with our live studio audience here at Twin Lotus Tide?
I'm feeling extremely stupid because thank you. Oh, darling.
It's a very appreciative audience, I want to add.
I'll read this. It's just that Eddie puts things in large type for me because my eyes are gone shot to hell. Maybe I should read Abracadabra.
That's the one that won the Pushcart Prize. Yeah.
So it's one page, right? Yeah. So Abracadabra, I'm reading this because I mentioned that I had written a poem that Thule Review from Poetry Center, Sacramento Poetry Center, had published it and had nominated it for a pushcart. And of course, we all know what it's like to have 6,000 nominations for pushcarts. But this is the only one that I ever got that turned into a pushcart receiver. And it's Abracadabra, and may I read that for you?
Oh, absolutely.
As a thank you to Thule Review. Abracadabra. When our mother yelled, "Stop that or I'll box your ears," I thought she meant chop them off and put them in a Roytown cigar box. A few years later, at the state fair, sideshow magician sawed a pretty older girl right through the middle. We screamed, yet she danced back to us, all smiles and sequins, her breasts bouncing the way I hoped mine would someday, a transformation I prayed for daily. When Mom wrung her hands over her many and various worries, hissing, "I'm simply beside myself," I tried to picture that diaphanous other version of our mother, not a ghost, but not all there like a real body, a magic vapor mother who mimicked her hand-wringing, pacing, contorted face, always beside her. Years later, when I knew something more about metaphor, she told me, "You've lost your head," when I married him and brought him home. Fast forward to a woman, me, in my bed, decades later, now master of my own arts of appearance and disappearance, and my cold acquaintance with how close one can come to death and not die. He sleeps, never sees my subterfuge when I grab my head by its sturdy helmet skull, give it a good crank to the right, lift it, and set it on the nightstand. Head is my night watchwoman, observant crone. She stays alert, enjoys the way moonlight limbs our bodies. His, 30 years later, still lean, sinewy, bent to my shape, mine slumped, rounded, in the pose of a person asleep, but really quite beside herself.
So that's Abracadabra by Kathleen Lynch. And you're listening to Coffee and Poets here. This is produced by Lawrence Dinkins and Sa'a. And wow, were you excited when that won a pushcart prize? Do they send you a letter, or do they send you money, or what is? I've never known anybody who actually won one.
You know, I don't care about winning. I know that's such a strange thing to say, but I mean, and I understand everybody loves getting, because I have to because of my condition, I have to kind of spend a lot of my life on the internet and on Facebook. And I see how wonderfully other poets are doing, and how many of them are getting, it seems like everybody has a book now, and everybody has learned things that I haven't learned yet. And I love learning new things. I will learn until I die.
Well, that's the important thing. And you get to share your poems. I mean, at least I would guess that more people got to hear that poem or got to see that poem because it won the prize. So you get to share your memories.
Well, I wonder, so many books out there and so many prizes, and I think it's wonderful when anyone gets one, but I do wonder how much of the field is wanting the writers to have been in writing programs. I was never in a writing program. I don't have that to declare.
You created your own.
So, Bob, you are so sweet.
No, you did. I mean, you said that at the beginning. You were piecing it together and figuring out what poetry was all along.
I had to.
So, so you talked a little bit. You mentioned your condition, and obviously poetry requires a lot of memory, right? You have to be able to remember a lot of things, and you went through a period of time where you couldn't remember, you couldn't speak for a while, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Right. I just want to tell this, not because I like to talk about this, but I just thought there are probably many people who are having parents or relatives or even lovers, whoever, who are getting diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's. And the fact is that there is a condition which I had and I never knew existed called NPH, normal pressure hydrocephalus. Seniors who have had several head injuries or even a really bad crash in a car crash or something can get NPH, which looks exactly like you've gone overnight into dementia. And so in the period of, I had many head falls because I had leg operations that, okay, don't ignore that. Ignore that how it got here. But I had, I reached a point in a very short number of weeks, I literally went from being able to do everything, drive, go, do anything, to like not knowing how to turn left at a street as I'm coming home from Trader Joe's. And when that day I couldn't turn left from Trader Joe's, I thought, this is bad, this is not good. And I drove into the driveway, could never get back in the car again. And in the next few weeks, I went into the state of complete decline. I was wheelchaired, my head was down, I couldn't lift my head up, I couldn't move my hand up, I couldn't gesticulate to anyone, I could hear everything. I could hear the discussions outside. I could hear the doctors and my kids and Eddie, everybody talking to each other, and I could not say to them, "I'm in here. I hear you. I've got it. I got it all. I understand. I just can't move. I can't say anything." And it's called normal pressure hydrocephalus. Like, you know, the babies that get the hydrocephalus, and they put tubes in them now so they don't have that. So we had it tested. That was a big deal because they don't really like to test late age people for hydrocephalus, but I had it, and they literally did in one day, took juice out of my spine, and I went from not being able to lift my hand or my head or my voice or talk or anything to being exactly like I am right now, kind of confused and kind of hijabby. Not hijab, but hijab. But it's like, please, if you have a chance to have someone who's being diagnosed that way, and it happens really soon, but unexpectedly soon, have them tested for NPH. That's all I have to tell about that.
That's great. Well, and it's wonderful that that you're back. I mean, you were gone. Obviously, it was hard for you and Eddie, but the whole community was kind of lost without you. We love hearing you read. You've done a couple of readings here in the last month.
Yeah, I'm the wheelchair reader now, and that's the other thing. I've learned a lot about ADA and how. I mean, there's so many cool things I'd want to go to downtown, but I couldn't, and I'm still learning how to be a good wheelchair person. And I hope I learn well enough so that I can get to the point of standing up. I have not been able to stand or walk for 3 years.
Yeah.
And if you think of that, just sit yourself down in a comfortable chair with your stuff around you that you like and think, what if I could only reach and have and do what's within my reach? What if I could only do that unless I had someone else come and do it for me? It's very clobbering.
3 years. 3 years is a long time.
Yeah, but I think that we do know that there are many people who are not getting diagnosed and they could be being treated. And they are not necessarily going to end up like me because I had other things wrong with my legs and stuff. So
Yeah.
They could end up with I have a tube just like the babies, the hydrocephalus babies. I have a tube that goes from my brain down into my abdomen and keeps the balance of pressure in my brain normal-ish. So.
Well, as normal as a poet can be.
Well, yeah, it's never been normal. But anyway. Enough about that thing. I just wanted to say that. So people who think I haven't gone to readings, I love going to readings. I loved everything I was doing. I had a very good senior life, and I'm sorry I missed your moments.
I remember when I first moved to Sacramento, you were hosting at Barnes & Noble.
Yeah.
And they had a wonderful series there, and I think I did open mic. I was petrified. That was the day you were up on the stand, and I thought, wow, that woman in the hat is really cool. You know? And I got up and read an open mic and was scared and slunk back to my seat. So, you know, we all kind of go through crises of confidence along the way. But
well, I'm glad that you remembered my hat, and I'm glad that you got up and read.
Yeah, me too.
I was always encouraging people who hadn't done it before.
Yeah, that was before I ever knew about SPC or got involved in that. Yeah, thanks, Stan. No, Stan Zumbiel had a part in that role.
Well, you've been a gift to us.
Well, it's like you. It's just something I love to do. You know, we just keep doing it. So.
And then you brought Joyce, and I mean, she was with you, but I mean,
she was actually the fire that lit
of course.
Lit the wood. So another poem, maybe. We've got a few more minutes. I think we probably hear another poem. And
do you want oysters or do you not?
You know, I like oysters. I like clams.
Did I do Boys at Play, Eddie? So this is a poem that I did built out of a childhood experience, which I didn't understand until years later. You mentioned something about a poem Sometimes for me, it can take the longest time it took me to write a poem was 16 years. I started a poem. I knew it was going to be interesting or had something, but I got to a point where the character in the poem just seemed to me like, I don't know what it's or she or it is going to become or do. So I had to keep trying that poem. I believed it was going to be a poem, but I didn't know where it was going to go. It took me 16 years to finish it. And then it got some kind of a silly
So
prize.
you just kept trying and trying, and then you found
I
something
wanted
that
to
clicked.
recognize what it was. It's always, for all of us, it's what's bubbling inside of you. It's very different from having a recipe poem where they say, if you're doing this, it would take all your verbs and change them into adjectives. Or, those are writing tricks, and sometimes they're very funny and useful, but that wasn't what I was doing. So this is built on a childhood memory and written as an old person. Boys at play, Armando remembers. They were matadors on bicycles, and I, the merest, therefore best girl, to serve them as their toro. But in fact, as God would have it, I was not a girl at all. There are strange things done in the midnight sun, Mother read from Best Love Poems. Oh, hijo, oh, sweet, my bird boy, she crooned, because I was invented under a strange sun. I cast no shadow. But the sun-stretched shadows of the boys snaked toward me. Playing cards chittered in their spokes. Evening purpled the sky. I stood barefoot on the still warm part of the schoolyard. I knew I would soon be on the asphalt, since Rico, king of Sacramento amigos, held a mean eye on me. So why not, for the moment, become the pretty Spanish dancer of my dreams, a chiquita with a rose in my mouth? This is how I learned to love Enigma. Flowers of my mother's prayers rose up to God, and the pachucos came slanging down on me. I twirled into my best tambourine tra-la, as if I could leap over them, thinking, Chica Chica has left the playground to study the science of how art affects the auras of taffeta in the great hospital of the theater. Que sera, sera, I sang for those boys as their wheeled steeds bore down, and a dress of unnatural beauty stepped out of my mother's closet to begin waiting for me. Evening leaned in like a father, lifted me in its arms, saying, little one, these purples are for you. Now lay you down, child. Now sleep.
Thank you, Kathleen. This is how I learned to love Enigma. I feel like maybe you're talking about poetry there, or
Yeah, and also by I'm forgetting the name now, because even if you get the medicine and get treated for the condition, you're still old and you're still forgetful. De Chirico, the artist De Chirico, one of my favorite quotes from him is, "What shall I love if not the enigma?" And
Okay.
that's, I think, a way to keep your life curious, always curious. Oh, I want to be amazed to the minute I die. I want to have that strange not knowing and finding out moment, the enigma.
and writing helps you get that?
Writing does, reading does, music does, a little dog in your lap does, a wonderful man does. Yeah. People like you do, you and Joyce. I mean, everyone in this room, that you look at you. I love you. I see your faces. I recognize them. I watch this guy go from young to white-haired, but he's still young. He's still way younger than I am. But it's just, and I see teachers, and I've watched so many people evolve and change and go through stuff. We're all going through stuff, aren't we? We're all going through stuff.
We are.
And because I'm a wordaholic, I'm always doing a lot of word puzzles because I'm sitting all the time, which is not my favorite thing. But what's the word we just learned that we love?
Sonder.
Sonder. I learned a new word in doing one of the word tests. Sonder.
Sonder with a D?
Sonder.
Sonder. And sonder means?
And sonder means the capacity to care. Can you think of another definition for it? It's like
seeing someone and suddenly realizing that they have an entire complicated life of their own.
That everyone in this room, everyone in the kitchen, everyone parking in the parking lot right now has a whole life, a huge story, which they can or cannot tell. They can or cannot recognize, but we all have stuff. I mean, I loved even talking to Lawrence before, having a chance to talk to him and learn a little bit more about his life. But it's so much more than he could tell. It's so much more than I could tell about. I mean, I would die just trying to remember my life and describe it because it's very complex, just like yours, just like everyone else's.
And so sonder, like the ability to sonder is the ability to understand another person deeply.
The capacity for empathy where you can look at someone and think, you may be thinking that's a shitty person, but you should also have the capacity to think they have come from something that helped make them that way. So even if you're really mad at all the people wearing the Trump hats, you have to have a heart for what got them to that point. It's capacity for empathy.
Empathy. Well, it kind of reminds me, I was reading the introduction or the blurb on the back. The judge who picked your earlier book, Hinge, for the Black Zinnia Prize 2004, that's 20 years ago, and he said, Kathleen Lynch writes poems about bacon and eggs, Halloween pumpkins, crabgrass, and the crack in the driveway. A world so common, so ordinary, we might not see it all were it not for the light of her poetry. And what a warm and loving light she brings. Hinge is a collection dignified by generosity of spirit, written by a poet who is willing to touch each physical miracle, and then to say out loud, I am grateful. So I'm grateful that you got to join us here today. Kathleen, thank you.
Thank you. I'm grateful.
Hope you had a good time.
I did.
Yeah.
Kind of good. I'm embarrassed, but yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. And so Coffee and Poets is produced by Lawrence Dinkins.
Yay, Lawrence Dinkins.
And here at Twin Lotus Thai Restaurant.
Which is a wonderful restaurant.
And this will be posted on the Coffee and Poets, the new Coffee and Poets YouTube channel. Probably in a few weeks. So last night I actually went on my TV and I found, I didn't like looking at myself, but it was nice to know that the interviews are there. So I'll let you know when they get posted.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Lawrence, and thank you again. Let's hear it for Kathleen.
I'm clapping loud. Clap, 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 clap.